New Jersey wetlands are very, very important. New Jersey is just a really, really big beach with a lot of pretty good water under it, and the wetlands are really important because they filter out the water for us, and they can actually help reduce our impacts, which is why I think they're most important. I am very concerned about the state of wetlands. It's very challenging in New Jersey because there's a lot of habitat destruction going on all the time because the population is very high. And the problem is wetlands happen to occur in places where we like to build, near the water, and that's really tricky.
I'll go back a little bit further. In fact, I'll go back to colonial times. The U.S. has lost half of its coastal wetlands since colonial times, and continued into modern times. People love to live along the coast. 80% of the world's population lives within 50 miles of the ocean. So it's the presence of people and this invasive species and other insults associated with human activities in the coastal zone that have put virtually all the marshes in peril.
Consider them like a giant filter, right? Water moves all over, above ground, below ground, and wetlands are the last filter before they get somewhere else, usually the ocean or rivers or things like that. And so they're really, really important because everything we put in the ground, everything that gets put into our water could potentially go out and harm things. And so it's really important for wetlands, particularly the plants and critters that live in them, to be there because they filter the water out and make it more suitable for the next environment.
People are recognizing more and more how important wetlands are producing the organisms that we consume, and wetlands are also buffer zones. Wetlands help reduce the energy intensity of storm surge and flooding due to the presence of hurricanes and other major storms.
And so it's kind of the same thing. Like wetlands are kind of that safety net for other ecosystems, in particular the ocean.
Phragmites or the species we're talking about, Phragmites australis, is a native species. It was actually described by Thomas Jefferson in the 1700s. It's been recorded in cores back 3,000 years. But the invasive form comes from Europe and/or Asia. And like any invasive species, it doesn't have many competitors nor predators here. So it can invade at a very, very fast and efficient rate, replacing virtually all the vegetation that's in the natural marsh.
They're just better at what they do. They're just, they have a whole suite of traits that make them better at getting nutrients. They're able to do more with less, and they're highly aggressive. There's a lot of reasons for why they're really aggressive. They are able to suppress natives through chemical weapons and things like that. A lot of invasives will actually release chemicals from their roots that act as a natural herbicide to natives. So it allows them to weaken their opponents so that they can gain competitive dominance in the systems they grow.
It actually, by its characteristic, it dries out the marsh over time. Phragmites fills in that fine, what we call the microtopography of the marsh. It raises the marsh surface and it smooths it out. So there's no place for the little fish to access and hide anymore on the marsh surface. It's like walking on a billiard table, and it grows very tall, and I mentioned it grows very dense. So what it does is it shades out the marsh. The young plants of other species can't take hold, and those smaller plants that are already there don't do very well in the dense shade that Phragmites creates.
Phragmites and some other invasives are different in how they handle water, how they take up nutrients, and so how these ecosystems or how wetlands function will change. And if we completely abandon them, we will see a major decline in native species. We'll see a huge decline in what makes New Jersey unique.
Well, here's the big conundrum for us in terms of dealing with Phragmites. There's something called the paradox of the dual mandate. Phragmites, I believe, as well as many others, are an issue for fisheries production. Fish don't do as well growing up in the Phragmites marsh, apparently. However, we talked about storm surge and we talked about flooding. Phragmites' dense roots really hold the soil together.
They are very rigorous growers. They establish very strong root systems. Strong root systems are beneficial because they stabilize earth. They stabilize land and soil and things like that.
Phragmites does a better job at erosion prevention and storm flooding prevention than Spartina ultimiflora does. So here is an attribute that favors humans in terms of living in the coastal zone where 80% of us live. And here's a negative attribute that reduces the production of finfish that contributes to a multi-billion-dollar commercial fishing, recreational fishing industry in the United States. We don't want too much dynamicism, change over time. We need things to be stable. How do we balance human need with natural system need?
And again, it comes back to that idea of like, what do we value and what do we think is important? And so what do we want to see here? If we value native species, we value diversity, then we got to take measures to kind of protect that. I feel some responsibility personally to, as a conservationist, to try to keep our natives and try to keep systems as they were. So at first I was of the mindset that we should try to get rid of everything. Let's try to keep everything as it was. And that's proven to be very challenging and very costly. I guess the approach now for me is to think about, well, what are their impacts and what is being lost with their invasion? If their presence doesn't cause a loss, then we might want to question, why is it that we need to get rid of them? But if what's lost is very valuable and important to us, then we should take measures to deal with these. But back to the ecosystem, there's just so many insects, several species of moths that rely on cattails to survive. And so without them, we may see the disappearance of those moths. And really there could be kind of like a meltdown effect where one triggers the absence of another. And so we may see kind of a waterfall, one thing causing another thing to decline and another and another. And so we don't know how drastic some of these changes might be or what the end consequences are, but they will be different and not great.
So the public recognizes that more and more, and hopefully there will be continued effort to not only protect wetlands, but there are so many initiatives around the country. There's an organization called Restore America's Estuaries that deal with restoration practices and restoration projects.
Here in Monmouth County in New Jersey, Monmouth County Parks runs a lot of programming, and then there is a lot of groups such as the Sierra Club and the Environmental Club here at the university where there's a lot of advocacy for conservation, and so you can go and attend their meetings. They have workshops where you can learn more about some of the impacts of invasives and what can be done.
I mentioned Restore America's Estuaries. There are organizations called the River Keepers and the Bay Keepers and so on. Contacting organizations, NGOs like that, non-governmental organizations, nonprofits, there are lots and lots of opportunities for volunteerism and education and so on. All the environmental centers, have programs. The Audubon has wetland programs. So there's plenty to go around. It's just a matter of thorough advertising as these organizations can do. But look up Restore America's Estuaries, and that's a great place to go. Google that, and you'll see a lot of the activities that are going around in the country.
In the face of climate change, in the face of human population growth and things like that, these are all very big challenges that are hard to deal with. But there's a lot of places to look for information and for guidance. You just got to seek it out.
So there's hope for the future, I think, and it's going to take a ongoing concerted effort to make sure that there's no backsliding in the progress that's being made.